Well, he was wondering what was Charles's opinion on Vladimir Putin and Russia in general, especially in light of Fatima. He has proven himself to protect Christians in Syria, but the Russians still frequently persecute Catholics within Russia and Ukraine. Is Russia being prepared to become Catholic and redeem the world as foretold, or is it just business as usual?
Well, that's the $16 question, isn't it? I mean, Putin either means what he says or he doesn't. If he means what he says about being the defender of Christianity, and not just in the Near East, but in Europe, then he will, within 10 years, he will dominate Europe. If it is just business as usual, more vaporings of a career politician, then it doesn't mean anything. As far as Russia goes, long before Fatima, 17 years in fact before Fatima, Vladimir Soloviev wrote a book called Russia and the Universal Church. And he pointed out that one of the greatest things that could happen in and for mankind would be the reconciliation of Russia with the Catholic Church. Because someone needs to take up the mantle of the double eagle again. Then Fatima came along and said that Russia in time, one way or the other, would be converted. I remember when I was a kid and I first heard that, my first thought was, what about us? What about the United States?
Yeah.
If Russia converts and we don't, then they're the good guys.
Yeah.
And while it's difficult to see any sign of Russia converting at the moment, it's even harder to see any sign of the United States becoming decent again, to any degree. As far as Putin's dealings with Ukraine and all that, let me say this about that. Ukraine, of course, is an interesting place. The largest single Eastern church in communion with Rome is the Ukrainian Catholic Church, which has several hundreds of thousands of members, if not millions. They're great people. The Orthodox Church in Ukraine is divided between those who favor a separate patriarchate of Kiev and those who want to be under Moscow. Now, if you look at the borders of Ukraine as they were at independence, the Crimea was tacked on to Ukraine in the 50s by Khrushchev, just as the easternmost areas they're fighting now were tacked on to Ukraine by Stalin in the 20s. The reason was the same for both Stalin and Khrushchev: the addition of non-Ukrainian territories to keep the Ukrainians tied to Russia. The only way that those boundaries could have been maintained as they were would have been for Ukraine to remain utterly neutral between Russia and the West, like Finland was before. If the Ukrainian government were going to gravitate toward the West, there was no way that Russia could allow them to take Crimea with them.
Okay.
It just couldn't happen. The same with the easternmost portions. Having said that, however, if Russia was going to take Crimea and the easternmost portions of Ukraine, she'll have to understand that she is in no way, the rest of Ukraine will inevitably go west. There's whether or not the neutrality thing being broken was a good thing or not, it has been broken. And my suspicion is that eventually Russia will annex the easternmost parts of Ukraine. And what's left will go into NATO and the EU and everything else. Russia is not, despite everything, really in the position that she was before the fall of the Soviet Union. She has a lot of weaknesses, a lot of problems.
Yeah.
That having been said, I think we've completely mishandled her.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of kind of the Southern thing, too, where we want to say, okay, Russia's totally good or Russia's totally bad, Putin's totally good. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Big time.
It's a big mixed bag. And, what you want out of me is a sheer endorsement or a sheer condemnation of either Russia or the South. You ain't getting it.
Right.
Because, unfortunately, when you're dealing with human politics, it's always a mixed bag. Always.
Yeah, but it's hard for people to do that because it's complicated and
I know.
there's a lot of ins and outs.
And
It takes a lot of thought.
And your eyes go up to the top of your head just thinking about it. I know, I understand. I feel the same way. But Putin is a interesting character. I mean, look, one thing I can tell you about Vladimir Putin, he loves his country, which for a head of state is all you expect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I've mentioned here before, years ago, listening to the George Putnam show, and Vicente Fox was the president of Mexico at the time. And in those days, the late, great George Putnam, all he was talking about was immigration. That was it. So he had this anti-immigration guy on. And the anti-immigration guy said something that really just, I started guffawing. He said, Vicente Fox doesn't give a damn about this country. All he cares about is Mexico.
I love that quote.
Yeah. Okay. You know, Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about Mexico. All he cares about is the United States. Okay. You know, people are silly. This whole deportation of kids thing, you know, Obama was doing it. Bush Jr. was doing it. It's only a problem when Trump does it. And then Trump signs an executive order cutting it off, and they're still going on about it. I think if Trump was smart, he would buy Mexico's war with Guatemala.
Okay.
Maybe transport it to our border, or maybe just keep it there. I don't know. If he does dislike Mexicans, maybe he dislikes Guatemalans as much as the Mexicans dislike Guatemalans. I don't know.
Okay. Well, back to the Putin. I'll make another recommendation. When we were talking about him, I made the same one. Watch the Putin talks with Oliver Stone.
Oh, yeah.
It's 4 episodes, each an hour long. And, you know, whether it's truth or lies, I like it because Putin gets to characterize himself. And I think Oliver Stone, you know, he's a huge pacifist guy, and I think he did it so that for that reason, so that we don't go to war, because he was so scared about a war. You know, he doesn't want Putin to just be like a cardboard cutout villain to us. He wants us to see him as an actual human being. With,
well,
you know,
I don't blame him. I mean, the truth of the matter is that, I mean, the idea of going to war with Russia is insane. It's absolutely madness. There is literally no issue between us that can't be solved with a couple of brains and some goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
And I include Ukraine. You know, the whole problem with Ukraine in the first place is the fact that Russia and the United States are once again enemies. But this makes no sense. We were enemies under the Soviet regime for very good reasons. But this government, the only reason why we're at loggerheads with them now is because they didn't embrace gay rights the way Mr. Obama felt they had to. Nobody's memory goes back far enough. But if you can think back, where did our first falling out with the new Russia take place?
Yeah, whatever happened to that big reset button with Hillary Clinton? You hit the reset button?
She sat on it and exploded. Obama was very, very committed to LGBTQ, MZLXY rights. And when the Russians made it a crime, I think, to agitate in favor of homosexuality or something, I forget what it was.
They outlawed public displays and such of homosexuality, like advertising.
Yeah.
I think that...
When they put that through, that was the beginning of our feud with them. Is that what we are as a nation? The LGBT states of America? If that's what we are, okay, fine. That means that most of us are part of a subject population, in which case we shouldn't be upset with any dictatorship anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because I don't judge, me in California. And we have 3 genders here by act of the state legislature.